Good afternoon everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all safe and well. Now on today's episode we're going to be doing something a little special. I think it's my turn to participate in the recent competition, or the one started this year, and that is the Jazz Vinyl Tag 2021. I'm going to throw in my 2 cents worth, because literally that's all it's worth is 2 cents. I'm going to be doing something slightly different from everybody else. So I'm going to modify the questions to suit my particular taste, my style of music, and hopefully you're going to find it entertaining. Please remember, this is all fun, this is all subjective, and there is no right or wrong answer. Although I'm going to start off with a proviso, a kind of like opening gambit. And please, anyone who's done their videos already, without you, I would have nothing to respond to. So please take it in that context. I'm not like having a go as such. I'm just going to give you my perspective on my style of vinyl, particularly jazz collection. Hopefully you'll see some merit in what I'm saying. If not, I totally understand. Everybody's got to do things their way, and I actively encourage that. So yeah, you can take whatever I say with a pinch of salt, but hopefully you'll find this particular version of the Tag 2021 jazz vinyl tag different to everybody else's. So let's start off with this. So I've got loads of notes. You're going to see me like bending down every now and again to either scribble out one of the questions I've asked, or there's a note that I've written for myself just to prompt me to, because a lot of things I'm going to try and circle back around to at some point. So there you go, that's the reason for doing that. So first of all, let me thank Chris from Tunes from the Man Cave for putting together this, well, not a competition as such, but it's a show and tell with a structure. So thank you very much, Chris, for doing that. Really loved your presentation, love what you're doing. So keep it up. You're doing like I said, without you and you putting together this particular show and tell, I wouldn't have nothing to respond to. So thank you very much for that. So we'll put that out of the way. Oh, I should say, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and leave links, audio links, for the tracks that I'm talking about, or the albums themselves, so you can have a listen to it for yourself, and you can decide whether or not some of the things I say, some of the decisions I've made, whether they stand up in your particular eyes. So yeah, I'll be leaving them down below so you can have a listen to. So you might need 2 or 3 YouTube browsers or pages open so you can watch my video and listen to the tracks at the same time. And yeah, anyway, so let's just start off at the beginning. So I've watched quite a few of these Jazz Vinyl Tag 2021 videos, and again, thank you guys for all your contributions. It's been fantastic to see some of your collections. So I'm going to start off with an analogy, and hopefully it's going to make sense. So let's start at the beginning. Now, in the realm of watches, Rolex is probably the preeminent brand out there. In the public's imagination, watches pretty much, in terms of the luxury end, start and stop with Rolex. That's just it as far as most people are concerned, and I can completely understand why. The hype surrounding their products, the way in which they limit the availability for most people. Even if you desired it, you'll find yourself on a waiting list for certain pieces, and that basically they've got real control over who actually gets their hands on their products. So that's partly the whole mysticism behind the brand as such. Now, how I'm going to try and apply this to the jazz fair, I'm going to try and circle back around to it, but please follow me on this. Now, if you speak to somebody who doesn't know much about watches, they will say to you, yeah, Rolex is easily the best brand out there. They make the best watches, full stop. Now, if you ask somebody who's into watches and has several watches and, that's their hobby, watches, they will say to you, quite rightfully, that for the sheer numbers of watches that Rolex makes, you can't see them as exclusive. They've got the best marketing, but they don't do anything truly special. They have iconic looking watches, but they don't do things. They don't really, in terms of watchmaking, they're pretty run of the mill. Most of their components, it's all machine built. There's very little interaction with skilled craftsmen in what they do. So when you speak to somebody who's really into watches, they will say to you, well, yes, if you're into watches and you want to take it further, you can go for brands like Gégé Lecoutre, Vacheron Constantin, Audemars Piguet, or you could go for De Bethune, or you can go for H. Moser, or you can go for FP Journe, or you can go for Grand Seiko. All of these particular brands which I'm just mentioning to you objectively make better watches than Rolex, but they don't have the brand recognition that Rolex does. So, okay, I've explained that. This is my analogy. It's really complicated, but hopefully you'll get what I mean when I'm actually going through my listings. So, as much as I've enjoyed most of in fact, pretty much all of the Jazz Vinyl Tag episodes which have been put out there, I feel a lot of people have played extremely safe. It's partly to do with how the questions themselves were framed, and I'm going to modify certain ones of them just to expand on the whole, because I'm into jazz full stop. I don't really care which label it comes out on. I don't care if it's an original or it's a repress. None of these things are really that important to me. What's important to me is composition. What's important to me is musicianship. Those are the things what I really go for. Originality, that's what I'm really into. So I'm not limited. As you can see behind me, I don't order my shelf in a way in which all Blue Note albums are together or all import albums. They're just scattered in there, and it's to do with the genre, how I think each album fits into my collection rather than what label they're on. So yes, that's partly to do with how I do things. So that's personal preference. So let's start at the beginning. The first question that Chris posed was the album which got you into jazz. Now, I've seen loads of people who have got magnificent collections. Don't get me wrong; they've got first pressings of loads of things, and I've got to salute all of you who do that. Yeah, I'm just not one of those type of persons. And when I entered into liking jazz and deciding this was a genre of music which was for me and I was going to pursue it, although I was aware of the high-end stuff and a lot of which have been seen in other videos, I followed what I thought, well, what I know to be what I like. And so I could easily say to you, make up a story and say, oh, the first album I bought was, let's just pull a random one off here. Coltrane, Live at the Village Vanguard again. Lovely album, lovely. Yeah, it's got everybody. This is a powerhouse jazz album. There's no doubts about it. I could say to you that's the first jazz album that I've ever listened to. It wouldn't be factually correct, but I could say that and you wouldn't know any different. I kind of like, when I'm talking to people about jazz and those who are not really into it, I tend to say to them, stay away from these albums to begin with. Think about what you like, what resonates with you, rather than what you're being told is the bee's knees when it comes to jazz. You decide for yourself what you like. and then you will have a hierarchy of jazz albums that you will, which will, each individual album that you buy will move up or down the actual scale depending on how many times you listen to it. What you feel about it, rather than just being told, oh, this album is it's the nuts, it's, you should have this in your collection because I've got it and thousands of others have got it and we all can't be wrong. You're not necessarily wrong, but I'm just saying this is a journey. You can try and start off with the high-end stuff, but you're soon going to exhaust your, the catalogs of these ones. There is a limited catalog, so whether it's 500 albums and you get them all, that's it. You've got nowhere else to go because you've done that. I feel you got to put some more like research into it. You got to discover some of the outliers in terms of jazz and see if they fit into your taste. So again, let's go back to this is going to be a meandering video. It's probably going to be the longest video I've ever done, so please forgive me. So the first album what really got me into jazz, and truth be told, loads of you who are into jazz and quite snobbish about it will say, well, that's not really a jazz album. And I would say to you, perhaps you're right, but the genre that it's in, and this will cover easy listening and lounge type music as well as popular, who decides what's what? Because in each of those genres that I've just mentioned, there is an overlap with jazz. There's no doubts about it. There's jazz influences in there. So just to write it off and say, well, I don't see that as a jazz album because it's not on Blue Note, it's not on a certain label, is kind of dismissing what the artists are trying to achieve. Now, you might find tracks on certain albums of other genres which are jazz orientated. Does that mean that you should dismiss it because it's not seen in the wider world, or those who decide what's jazz and what isn't would say to you, well, okay, because it's on a pop album you can't have a jazz track on it, therefore it's not jazz? That doesn't really make sense, and that's for you to decide anyway. So going back, try and stay focused now. Okay, the first album I'm going to show you is George Shearing with Nat King Cole. And yeah, this is not only a lovely album. Let me take it out of the sleeve. The glare's bothering me. Not only is it a lovely album, full stop. Yes, it is in the lounge and popular as well as easy listening. But when you listen to oh, where's the track now? I've lost it from my... Why have I lost this track? Let There Be Love. How can I forget that? See, I'm just so excited by talking to you guys. I've totally forgotten what was... Yeah, Let There Be Love. Now, what I would say to you is, when you listen to it now, because I'm going to leave a link down below, when you listen to it and you take out Nat King Cole singing and you just listen to what George Shearing is doing and the other musicians are doing, tell me that's not a classic jazz underpinning. Tell me it's not that. You'll have to argue really quite strongly to me. It'd be really hard for you to convince me that that isn't jazz, because it certainly is. But in terms of leading me into the path of my jazz journey, I've got to say, that particular track of this album just done me in. The sheer beauty of the musicianship just took my breath away. And the more I listened to it, both as the vocal version with Nat and without him, the more I appreciate it. It's like, try and find me a better piano jazz intro than what George Shearing is playing on Let There Be Love. Try and... You tell me what it is, and it's like, I'd be happy to listen to it. I'd be happy to try and evaluate one against the other. But I would say, definitely, in terms of where my fundamentals and appreciation of jazz comes from, is from that track. So that's the first one. Hopefully that wasn't too controversial for you, but there you go. In fact, I've got for me to keep up with all the questions, I'm going to have to put an asterisk next to them so I can see it at a glance. what I've already answered. So the second question is the first jazz album that you've bought. And again, here's a bit of controversy because again, there's quite a few people out there who would say, well, that's not actually jazz. And I would say, well, yes, it is. And you have to demonstrate to me why you think it isn't. I definitely think it is. So I'm going to show it to you first rather than just getting straight into moaning. It's the Joe Harnell Golden Piano Hits, and the track that I'm going to be using for the example of first. Yeah, so I bought this in a thrift shop for about £2 at the most. It was a shop which was newly opened. They were selling secondhand vinyl. Saw this, saw the track being which interested me, which was Take 5, and I thought to myself, yeah, I've heard the Brubeck one, and you know, it'd be interesting to see what somebody else's interpretation is like. This particular version of Take 5 by Joe Harnell, I think if it's not as good as the Brubeck version, I think it's slightly better. I think the piano work on here is just, it's just sublime. It's so underrated. Those who know the track know how good it is. If you've never heard it before, I'm going to leave a link down below so you can hear it for yourself. I just think it's an absolute tour de force in jazz pianoship, and it's just absolute fun. It's where, you know, what jazz can be when it's, you know, when they're not trying to be too clever. It's clever, yeah, don't get me wrong, but it's not knowingly clever. It's there to entertain you. So yeah, first jazz album I can consciously say that I bought, knowing it was jazz or appreciating the jazz element in it. I'm gonna go with this one, Joe Harnell, Golden Piano Hits, and I'll take from this one the Take 5 track. Oh, I gotta stand back, I gotta kiss myself, that's how good it is. Now in the original version of this particular show and tell, the lovely Chris went through 5 different jazz labels and asked you to pick out your favorite from those labels. Now, I'm not saying he's wrong, but I'm saying if you design the questions in that way, what you'll end up going to have and what you're going to end up with is a lack of surprise, a lack of just well, if you're familiar with my particular channel, you know I always champion the underdog. But as you can see behind me, for those who are like really vigilant, you can see Impulse albums, you can see Blue Note albums, you can see all sorts of things there. As much as I appreciate those catalogs and they are fundamental to jazz, I want to talk about the outliers, the people who have taken risks, the different flavors of jazz, rather than just confining it so narrowly to what is, you know, 50s and 60s American jazz. That's just one aspect of what jazz is out there. I want everybody to have an appreciation of what else is out there. So instead of using his guide, which was using the record labels themselves, I'm going to go by location instead. So where these particular artists, these groups originated from, and the flavor that they bring, the contribution they make to jazz just by being located outside of America and not trying to, although their underpinnings are the American style, they've added their own flavor and made, you know, versions of jazz in their own image. And I super appreciate that. I can't get enough of it. So beginning with Belgian jazz. Now you're going to say, A, where's Belgium, for those who are not in Europe? Look it up. And B, is like, well, what they got to contribute to the world of jazz? And I would say to them, this album, Placebo, Only 19 album. This album is absolutely stonking. it's got such a vibe to it. It's good musicians playing music intelligently. It's not overly knowing. There's a sense of fun and frivolity here, but that's not to say it's unprofessional, because it's certainly that wouldn't be a clear or apt description of what's going on. This is fine jazz, just from outside the normal stable of what North America's doing. It's got its own flavor. Now again, you might say to me, well, I would say to you, if you are a person who enjoys foods from around the world, then why can't you apply that to your taste in jazz? Why yeah, you might have been brought up on burgers, that sort of thing, but there's Indian food out there, there's Japanese food, there's Lebanese food, there's West Indian food, all of which have delicious dishes. It's just that until you have the opportunity to taste them, you won't know. So I'm saying to you, taste them, get your palate round, see what's out there. So representing Northern Europe, I have the Belgian album Placebo, and it's only 19's the name of the album. Absolutely fantastic, this one. So you go, oh, what else you got then? So representing South America, we have an album by jazz album by Vitor Assis Brazil, and the album's called Dissenos. Now, some of you are familiar with my channel, know how much I rate this album. This is super smooth. If you didn't know that if you heard it blindly and nobody just said, just listen to this, and not said anything else, not only would you fall in love with it, but you would have really no idea of its origins in Brazil. You just wouldn't. It's not trying to be American. It's adding the Brazilian, some of the samba flavors, the samba, not even the bossa nova flavors, to what's already established in jazz at that period. And I think this album, came out in '66. So they obviously knew, and they were paying reverence to the American jazz scene. But again, it's a different flavor. They're trying to give you something which you haven't heard before or wasn't available in the American market. So again, I'm going to try and leave a link down below for you to hear some of the tracks, if not the whole album itself. Give it a real good listen to, because I think this is absolutely superb, this particular one. Right, the next album, representing Asia and Japan in particular. Again, those who know my channel know my love for this particular album, and here we go. It's the Miyazaki +5, and the album is called Animal's Garden. I got quite a few Japanese jazz albums, but I got to say, on balance, I got to say this one not only puts a smile on my face, it's probably the most consistent. It's just a thing of beauty, this one. They just get every element of jazz just so right, but yet it's with a unique voice, and that's what I appreciate. I like different flavors of jazz. I like that there's some risk takers out there, and I think that's what's going to keep the genre going. The interest in the genre going is that there are things out there which for you to discover if you just give it a chance and try and, don't get me wrong, the American jazz scene, that's the fundamental one, that's the motherland of everything. But once you've experienced that, there are other things out there, and this album is a superb example of what's out there if you give it a chance and don't just turn your nose up at it because it hails from somewhere that you wouldn't associate with jazz. So yeah, if you see this album about, it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned, but have a listen to it. I'm going to try and leave links down below for you to give it a good listen to and see what you think. Now, representing Britain and the UK, because I'm in Britain. We have a solid jazz scene out here, and it's gone back for decades. It's not a case of we just like rolled up out of nowhere. Jazz in Britain is a big deal, but equally it's got its own flavor to it. And I think a really good example of it is this particular album. Look at that beautiful cover. This is the Bird Curtis Quintet, and the album is entitled Needs Be. Again, this is solid jazz with its own distinct flavoring. Now, as I said with some of the other ones, like with the Japanese, you'd be thinking, oh, more like sushi or stuff like that. Well, you can say with England, it's fish and chips or pie and mash, something quintessentially English. But this slice of jazz is, it's beautiful. I got this in the last year or so. Never heard of them before, and much to my shame, because once I gave this album a chance and listened to it, it did change a lot of my perception of what jazz can be. It's just a naughty little piece of just sheer invention and professional musicianship. I can't get enough of this, and hopefully by seeing it in my hands, you guys will research it for yourselves and see if it fits into your catalogue. So, representing Britain and Northern Europe, this is Bird Curtis Quintet and the album Needs Be. Superb. So the last out of this section, when I'm doing it in the sense of instead of record labels, I'm doing it by location. The last one just blew me away when I heard this particular album. And again, if you've seen my channel, I have mentioned it before, but I've probably underplayed how good this album is. So representing Africa, we have Chris McGregor and the Castle Lager Big Band. Yeah, this is an absolute, it's just, again, if you listen to this and if somebody puts this on for you to listen to and they don't tell you anything else about it, they just say listen to it if you like jazz, not only are you going to love it, you're going to think to yourself, who are these people? Why have I never heard this before? Why? You'd ask yourself so many questions. And when I actually say to you, well, this was, an album which came out in, I'm just trying to see 1963, something like that. And it was done in South Africa. You'd be going, what, is there any more like that? And there is more albums. Don't get me wrong, I'm struggling to find these albums. But when you find these gems and you compare and contrast with what the Americans were doing at that stage, you can't say this one falls down. You can't say that this is an inferior album, because it's not. I'd put this up against pretty much anybody from the American stable, all the big hitters. I'd put this album up against them, and I'd say to them, okay, take your bias out of it and just listen to it, and you tell me which one's better. You're not going to say this, the American one's going to get out of a landslide. You're just not. This is too good an album. If you see this out in the wild, please do get your hands on it. This particular copy, this was like a limited release of 500 albums, I think, worldwide. You will, if you're really into it, once you've heard it, you probably can find it if you try hard enough. But I'd say just give it a listen to. It's going to improve your knowledge of jazz, your appreciation of jazz. It's really going to make a difference there. So this is the one representing Africa, and it's the Chris McGregor and the Castle Lager Big Band from 1963, I think I said that. Yeah, have a listen. Right, so that's those elements dealt with. So I'm going to try and just scrub these off as I'm going through. Right, next one is small label or subsidiary. Quite understand where I do understand where Chris was going for. He was trying to go outside the box of what everybody's got, collectively. So as you can see, I've gone a bit off script here, so I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm gonna, this was a private pressing, and the actual label is Kilmarnock Records, and the example I'm going to show before you is a lovely one by Gort McDermott, It's a 7-inch. Yeah, I'll try and get my fingers out of the way. And the track that what certainly interests me and blew me away from his back catalogue is the track Cold Coffee. Again, in terms of piano jazz, if you've never heard this before, you are in for an absolute treat. It is absolutely astonishing, this tune. The vibes that I don't know how people do this. It's like I don't have the capacity in my brain to be as creative as this gentleman here and the track Cold Coffee. Now, the other tune on here is called Space, and that was like a Busta Rhymes tune. When you hear it, you'll go like, oh yeah, that's what Busta Rhymes used. Anyway, the reason for having it on 7-inch is I could have got the individual albums for these. I'm not saying easily, but they are available. But when I listened to the albums, it didn't really resonate apart from for what was for me the standout track. So when this became available as a 7-inch and I can have exactly what I wanted from that album, I snapped it up. So Gordon McDermott, Cold Coffee on the Kilmarnock label. This is going to represent my small label stroke subsidiary. Ooh, ooh. I'm going to leave a link down below for you to hear it for yourself if you've never heard it. Ooh, it's going to change your life when you hear Cold Coffee. Oh gosh. Right, next one will be jazz artist who not a lot of people know about. Okay, this is a recent acquisition for me, and yeah, it blew my mind when I came across it and gave it a listen. This is a gentleman called Albert Daly, and the album is called Renaissance. So let me show that to you. See, as you can see, it's still in the factory packaging. Let me just read the blurb. Modern and grounded in 1960s hard bop sensibility, the American pianist and composer Albert Daly had perfect control over his instrument. Since an early age, he had played with cutting-edge musicians, the likes of Art Blakey, Sarah Vaughan, Stan Getz, and Charles Mingus. But despite that, he was underrated artist during his lifetime, receiving deserved recognition only after his death. Okay, there's more to read, but you can read it for yourselves. Yeah, this album is absolutely astonishing, and again, this is some of the unfairness which happens in music, where it's not all the time that the cream rises to the top. In a meritocracy, it would do, but sometimes for mitigating factors, there's certain artists who don't get the acclaim that they should do, and it's a real shame, because this guy's got juice. This, in terms of jazz, I would say this is more in the spiritual jazz camp, and it's probably the best production or the best produced spiritual jazz album that I probably own. There's going to be one or two what can give it a competition, but in terms of composition, in terms of musicianship, my goodness, I feel kind of upset that I had never heard of this person, and there's people out there who know far more about jazz than I do, who never said a word about this album. It's just not out there in the ether. It's not one of those kind of accessible ones. So hence why I've done my particular listings different to everybody else's, because I want albums like this to be recognized for what they are, and it's pure genius. That's what it is. It's just genius. So again, I'm going to try and leave links down below so you can have a listen to it for yourself. But hey, we're all on a journey with our jazz collections. I have just chosen to take a path which is off the well trodden one. I like to champion, as I said, the underdog, and this is a great example of, if you take a chance, you will discover jazz which will not only blow your mind, but if I was to play this to somebody who's got loads of jazz, who's got all the Impulse albums, who's got all the Prestige albums, if I was to play this to them, they'll go, damn, that's a fine jazz album. It's only because it was on an independent that you didn't give it a chance. But anyway, enough about that. Yeah. So that was my jazz album that not a lot of people know about, and it's relatively new to me. Well, new to me as well. The next one is my jazz album of 2020. And again, I'm going to be controversial because there's loads of people out there who will show you the best album they purchased in 2020. And it's probably a back catalogue album. Nothing wrong with that. You can interpret these questions in any way you want, and I will do likewise. So my album of 2020 is kind of like a double-edged thing. So controversial in the sense that it's a compilation album, Pyramid Pieces Part 1. So it's a compilation album, so loads of you will be going like, ooh. The significance of this one is, you've already seen me go through some of world jazz. This will be included in that as well, because this is jazz which originates from Australia. Now, there's loads of you out there who go, what are you talking about? The Australians got no interest in jazz. Listen to this compilation and you will discover for yourself, guys and girls in Australia take their jazz just as seriously as you do. It's just that they're aware of what you're doing, you're not aware of what they are doing. But that's an issue for you, not for them, because again, if you really want to expand your knowledge of jazz and seek out the truth, you want to seek out the cream of the crop, this is a really good introduction to it. And on the basis of listening to this compilation, it's furthered my knowledge. I will be seeking out in time to come loads of the artists who feature on this album, and I will present them on my channel at some point when I get hold of them. I know it's going to be a quest which is going to take years. I might even have to physically go to Australia to get those albums, but at least I know they exist, and this album has helped me to understand what's out there. So in terms of 2020 jazz and what's blown my socks off and given me, give me further appreciation of what jazz can be, this one here. Don't dismiss it out of hand, because you got in your mind, I can only have original albums, I got to have first pressings. You're doing yourself a disservice. There's jazz out there which you will enjoy. You just have to give it a chance. You have to take, you have to remove yourself from. There's the collecting side of it, which I really do get. I get it, having the first presses and that, but that also confines you. All that does is, when people who have got the same records as you present you with the same knowledge, it's like it just reinforces what you think is good, rather than spreading your wings and finding out, is there another way to see this? Is somebody coming from the left hand side or the right hand side, or from up above or from down below, who can give me the sound that will resonate with me and I will keep forever? I just don't know about them yet. This is going to help you. So that's that one. You see how passionate I am. This is why I have to thank Chris for putting this together, because it's like, I could have quite happily have not said anything. My collection would have expanded and not said anything. Just kept it to myself. But no, I think everybody out there should be aware of what's out there. So the next question is, favorite album from a artist's discography. I can't even say it. Discography. I don't know why I got tongue twisted. I think it's the excitement. So again, those who are familiar with my small channel would know that I've got a lot of love for this particular artist. I think she's super underrated. There's people who go, oh yeah, Alice Coltrane, yeah, she's the best thing. Anyway, I'm not saying they're wrong, but what I'm saying is you're wrong. And we're going to go instead with Dorothy Ashby. Let me take it out of the sleeve to prevent more glare. This album is supersonic. The more I think about this album, the more it freaks me out how good this is. This woman, if you used to look in a pictorial or illustrated dictionary under creative, innovative, all those kind of things, it would be a picture of her in jazz, because it's just like this woman. I truly believe if you release this album today, and you know it didn't exist before, but you released it today, they will put this woman on, this artist, on such a pedestal, and rightfully so, because she's just out there. But that's part of the danger for some people. Some people can't get their head round that you need outliers, you need people to push the frontiers of what can be jazz, in order for everyone else's knowledge and creativity to be stimulated to the point where we get better and new material. That's part of the problem with, I think, with jazz, is that it's stagnant, that people just want to stick within the kind of like the, let's say, you know, 60s to 75, and they don't want to look beyond that, because they, you know, but that's a, I'm not saying it's a fault of yours, but what I'm saying, you can collect whatever you collect, but what I'm saying is there's artists such as Dorothy Ashby who just pushes it. Not only she's using the harp, or I think she's using, well, predominantly harp in terms of her back catalogue, but in terms of, she's got a Japanese instrument, I think it's called the koto, yeah, I think it's the koto, which she's playing, and this is what she's using there. She just takes things to a different level, but her willingness to experiment is really, which is touching to me, that she's kind of like, she's gone through the equation in her head. Do I play it safe and get the notoriety which my skill represents in a meritocracy, or do I take chances and perhaps not be as famous as some of the other jazz musicians, composers out there? And she decided, I'm going to take the hard road. This is a phenomenal album, and for me, it probably in my jazz collection, it's a top 10 album. I will push many a Miles Davis album to one side, even a John Coltrane, definitely a Charlie Mix. I'll push them guys to the side, because you kind of know what you're getting with them. Not to say that they weren't groundbreaking in their own way, but this is where the real deal is at. So if you see this particular album, The Rubaiyat of Dorothy Ashby, please give it a listen. If you're into jazz and you've got, you know, a substantial amount of Blue Note albums or whatever, check this one out. This is on the Cadet label. My goodness, this album is just a thing to behold. Yeah, 1970, I think this was released, something like that. Absolutely fantastic. Give it a whirl. The next question is, oh, let me find my pen. Okay. Favorite jazz album bought in a store? Well, up until the current virus problems, I was in record shops all the time, so it was a natural thing for me to, I'd rather go and visit the shop rather than do it online, but such is the way of life, we haven't been able to do that recently, excuse me. But when I'm thinking about my collecting of jazz and my experience of going into shops, and there's times when I've thought I've won the battle against the retailer, or the retailer's has won the battle against me. I'm going to show you an example of one where I think I won. So again, there's some of you out there, when you see this artist name, you might go, well, no, he's more in the kind of lounge, kind of swing, kind of popular music. He's not really, because we've already gone through him again. This is the second appearance by this particular artist, and it's George Shearing, but this time he's with a gentleman called Brian Toff, and Brian Toff is one hell of a bass player. Never heard of this guy before I bought this album, but this album, I'm not saying that I like all of it. There is one particular track called High and Inside, and I'm going to link it down below so you can hear it for yourself. This track is a monstrous jazz tune. The bass line which Mr. Torf is playing is absolutely astonishing. Now you can say, yeah, Mingus. You can say, oh, I'm just trying to think of off my head. Who's the other guy who? It will come back to me anyway. Is it Ron Carter? I think it is. They're kind of like the go-to guys in jazz for bass playing. But this guy, Brian Torf, the guy plays monstrously on this. He plays as good as any one of those two on their finest day. And I don't say that lightly because I respect those two guys. But you know what? I've got to say, when you listen to this track, and I'm going to leave the link for you, as I said, you're going to say, ooh, 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 ooh. So there you go. This was only about £4 in UK money. It's absolute steal. Like I said, I don't really like the album in the entirety, but that one track, in terms of how often I play that track compared to how much I paid for it, it's one of the best value proposition jazz albums I've ever bought. It really is astonishing. So yeah, if you see this album out in the wild and you hear, well, you get an opportunity to hear the track High and Inside, you'll see what I mean. So there you go. The next one, favorite jazz album bought online. Okay. Oh god, this video is going on for some time, but yeah, I think it's worth it because, as I said, I'm trying to highlight albums to you that you haven't heard of, you probably wouldn't have seen before, and I believe they deserve the respect that many of the other episodes that you've seen by other YouTubers, they're operating on a very similar level, just that they're just less well known. So please forgive me for the length of this video, but I think it's wholly necessary. So this particular album, The Sounds of Synanon, Pacific Jazz Records.